Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Copilot Compass, where each week we take a deep dive into Microsoft 365 Copilot. As always, I have the pleasure of being joined by my esteemed colleague, fellow Copilot enthusiast, and our resident smart guy, Logan.
Thanks, Grant. Happy to be here.
Logan, why don't you tell the folks at home a little bit more about what they can expect in this week's episode?
Yeah, so as always, we'll get started with our question of the week, and then we're going to get into our topic, which is determining costs of agents that are built in Copilot Studio. So it can be a little bit, tricky to figure out exactly how much, different agents are going to cost, but we're going to break it all down today. So it should be super clear going forward. And make sure you stay tuned to the end for a sneak preview of what we have coming out next. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.
Awesome, let's get into it.
Let's do it. All right, so let's get into our question of the week. And remember, you can submit your own question either by leaving a comment on this video or by emailing the email address in the description. So this week, our question is, what kind of training or onboarding did your team need to get the most out of Copilot?
Training or onboarding the most out of Copilot. Yeah, I don't know if maybe I'm not interpreting the question the right way, but I think for me, I try to think of what was the most effective component of training, I guess. And I think really, and it's not just our team per se, but really anybody using, and it doesn't even have to be Microsoft 365 Copilot. It could be any of the LLM tools that are publicly available. It's really about prompting. I think we've mentioned this in a few episodes before. Most people, if they just don't have any training, they're just kind of like, all right, let me start experimenting with a tool like Copilot Chat or Chat GBT. They tend to start treating it like they've treated search engines for so long by just using short phrases, keywords, things like that. So I think you've really seen a lot of value out of just some basic, training on how to structure a prompt, like how to give it context and, tell it specifically what sources you want to pull from and, this level of specificity that you need to include in those prompts. And I think really if it comes down to, hey, you've got 1 minute to teach somebody something cool about using these tools, it really is just treat it like a human being, speak to it like a human, treat it like you would, if you're asking a data question, like your data analyst on your team or, somebody that helps you with your content, just treat the tools exactly that way, use natural language, full sentences, specific, and just keep in mind that, if you're asking a human being to help you create a PowerPoint deck, if you want it to look a certain way, you have to tell them specifically how you want it to look. So I guess to sort of boil it all down, I think the most effective training that we found, not only for our teams, but with companies that we work with, is just how to structure a prompt. I don't know. Maybe I'm interpreting the question wrong. So I'll shut up and turn it over to you, Logan. What do you think? Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the biggest thing for me personally was just kind of like forcing myself to use it, every day in all the different applications. I'll say I was like definitely a little bit skeptical at first, and I was kind of like, I mean, I already know how to do my job. Like I said, I don't know if I necessarily need Copilot's help with certain tasks. So it definitely took like a conscious effort of like, okay, even though I know how to do this, I'm going to have Copilot help me in Outlook. And then, I found out, oh, that was actually a little bit easier. And, it kind of ties into, what you're talking about prompting too is, the only way you're going to learn how to, create better prompts is by just forcing yourself to use it. And, over time you improve and you see the improvements Copilot helps you with. Yeah, I mean, at least for me, that was really the biggest thing was just, actually making myself use it to get used to it and, learn how to work with it.
Yeah, like guided experimentation really is key with really any digital transformation journey, giving people the opportunity to get their hands on it, experiment with it. And, in your case, like you're savvy enough that you're going to go, if you get stuck, you go find an answer. But, I think when it comes to an organization, having a center of excellence where there's a subject matter expert that people can turn to or some kind of a team they can turn to for questions or guidance is really helpful because if you reach that experimentation phase and you're getting frustrated and you don't know how to find answers, then this all of a sudden becomes a tool that you hate. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, that was a good one. Let's get into Copilot Studio, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so today's episode, we're going to talk about Copilot Studio and specifically about estimating the cost of agents. This is a common problem. You start talking with a customer or maybe someone in your leadership team about some use cases where an agent might be helpful. And the logical question that somebody that has, financial control or, buying decision-making power is going to be, well, how much is that going to cost? And the pricing for this, it is good and bad in the sense of its level of flexibility. It's really going to charge you based on how complex your agent is, but that does, the benefit for you as a business is you're not overpaying for simple agents. But at the same standpoint, there is some complexity to, doing those estimations. So we thought it'd be helpful to give you guys an overview of, some of the basic agents. We've covered these in a few episodes, how you can build some agents in Studio. So we thought we'd just touch on some of the basics of how those are priced and what kind of costs you can plan for, I guess you could say, with these agents as you deploy them. So what is Copilot Studio? For those of you maybe missed those few episodes where we've covered this, it's really kind of a low code to high code, platform for you to build agents for the organization and for employees to build, agents for themselves and their teams. My opinion, I think it's a really great tool for an organization because it's got advanced enough level stuff that your developers can use those high code scenarios to build complicated agents. But it's also simple enough that you can have business users or people within business units that just go through maybe a full day training, learn how to use this, and now they can build agents for their team, and they don't have to have that deeply technical background. So it's, can kind of hit both ends of the spectrum there. We see a lot of value in that, enabling business users to build these agents because they're the ones that really understand the use case. So, having a couple of folks embedded within a business unit that know how to deploy these agents can be really impactful. So it can be deployed internally and externally within Studio. So you can, do this, build agents that are, helping business processes within the organization, but you can also have agents that are published, externally or to partners and stuff like that for that type of consumption there. Copilot Studio does integrate with Power Platform, and it does also integrate with Dynamics and M365. So you can, do some additional work there. Now, there are 3 ways to get access to Studio. One is have an M365 subscription, M365 Copilot subscription. So if you're in that, premium Copilot license, you do get access to Studio. There is some limited functionality of that versus the other 2 options, and you can enhance that functionality with, supplementing it with one of these additional Studio options. But just know that if you have an M365 Copilot license, you have access to Studio, you can build some agents. Just know that, it's meant more for the everyday user. It's those, no code to very, very low code agent scenarios that are enabled there. Okay, so getting into the other 2 options. So these do not require an M365 Copilot license. So these can be, the scenarios where you have somebody where maybe you've assessed that the $30 per user per month license isn't quite worth it for M365 Copilot, but you still maybe want to have like a simple agent like an onboarding buddy or an HR help desk ticketing system, stuff like that. There are message packs, and then there are pay as you go. So first we'll cover pay as you go. This is exactly as it sounds. You're paying on a consumption basis at the end of a month for the number of sort of interactions you've had. And again, how many messages you consume. We'll get into that in a moment here in some detail, but it just depends on the number of sources the agent's drawing from, if it's giving you classic answers or generative answers. Is there orchestration? Are there autonomous tasks that are being taken? Some of the more logically complicated things are just going to cost you more messages. So in this case, the pay-as-you-go model, you're paying simple. It's 1 cent per message pack. And this gives you access to the per user license. Now, there's also the message packs. So this is basically where you're buying 25,000 messages per pack at $200 per pack. So you can see that there's a little bit of a discount there for this model. You're paying in advance, so you're paying for this at the start of the month. And if you don't use them all, unfortunately, they don't roll over. So it's, kind of the meter resets at the start of the next month. And it is calendar month, just to clarify that. Microsoft does recommend that you supplement that message pack option with pay-as-you-go meter for if you go over. So, let's say you have 3 message packs, you burn through those 75,000 messages before the end of the month. Now you can have that meter kick on, so you pay that 1 cent per message for whatever overages you do. If you don't have that pay-as-you-go meter enabled, you essentially are just going to start losing access to those agents. They're just going to stop working until the next month once you reach 125% capacity for the, however many packs or messages you paid for in advance at the start of the month. So why would you use one or the other? The pay-as-you-go model is really great for when you have unpredictable usage. So if you've got like a lot of seasonality with the agents you're building, maybe you're just getting started and you don't quite know how well adopted these agents are going to be, that might be a good option for you. If you're using a lot of messages, if you're very predictable in the nature in which that, your users are using the agents, then that message pack is going to give you a little bit of a discount there because again, $200 for 2,500 message or 25,000 messages versus pay as you go 1 cent per message. So, that is kind of the basics on Copilot Studio and the ways that you can get access to that technology. With that, what we're going to show you next is a cost estimator that Microsoft has. This is public facing, and it's a good tool to help you estimate. All right, well, now I understand that there's message packs and there's pay as you go. How do I know how many messages my agent's using? So we'll go ahead and demo that for you now. Okay, so now we're going to show you the Copilot Studio Agent Usage Estimator. So this is a great tool for you to understand, how much is an agent that you're going to be building going to cost you. So we'll give you an example here. You've identified a use case for an agent within your organization. You're talking about it with your manager or somebody, that's in the business decision-making department. And the logical question that they're going to have for you is, okay, this looks great. How much is it going to cost? So this is a good tool for you to try to get an estimate of, all right, roughly how much is this agent going to cost us if we deploy it? And then you can kind of factor that against the value that you're getting from it or the return on that investment and, make some decisions from there. Now, again, this is great for estimates and forecasting if you're on those message packs, but keep in mind it is an estimator. It's not going to be concrete and exact. So we're going to walk you through this, and just before we do that, to lay a groundwork on the example scenario we're going to use here, we're looking to deploy an agent at our organization that's going to be used by our sales teams, our account managers, specifically folks that are working with our existing customers. And this agent is going to basically answer questions about Copilot and our services. So it's going to have access to 2 different SharePoint folders. One of them contains marketing material on our Copilot services. So it's got like a pitch deck in there. It's got some flyers in there, some FAQs, other miscellaneous marketing things. So everything that we do Copilot service wise, all in one place. This agent's going to answer questions on that. So, an account manager can go in and just say, hey, how much does our AI vision and value workshop cost? Something like that. The other set of sources that it has is basically everything on the Copilot scenario library. So if you're not familiar with the scenario library, get familiar with it. It's a great place if you're getting started to try to identify some good early adoption and good use cases for Copilot. They've got things split up by industry. They've got things split up by role type. So really good stuff there. We've kind of downloaded a lot of that material and we've got it in a folder, a SharePoint folder specifically so that, our AMs could also ask questions about, can Copilot do task X, Y, and Z? And it can generate the answer for them there. It's not drawing from any web-based information, just again, those SharePoint folders, it's only source of truth. So With that in mind, we're going to walk through our estimator here. So we're going to just select an estimate based on common telemetry data and assumptions here. You can do manual entries. This more like if you're kind of in that, I'd call it more moderate to high code type of scenarios, like you are a developer, you know a lot about what this agent's going to look like. That might give you a little bit better estimate, but for the sake of, business user deploying an agent, I think that this first option here is a good one for us. All right, so we're just going to throw out some numbers here so you can see how this works. So we're going to say that we've got about 15 folks that are going to need access to this particular agent, and then we're going to say that they are going to need it. Let's say 5 times a month, once a week. They're going to use this agent. All right, agent type. So is it employee facing or is it, basically externally facing, customer and partner facing? Our agent in particular, we said just our revenue teams, our account management teams, employee facing only agent. All right, now, do any of the users have an M365 Copilot license? Well, let's ask another question first. Why is that important? Well, your M365 Copilot license users are not going to count against your message packs. That's kind of comes with the SKU there. So we're going to say that we do have some. And in this case, we're going to say that we have 3 users in that team that have our Copilot license. All right, next question, agent orchestration. So classic versus generative. So classic is kind of like if you maybe were on a website a couple years ago and it popped up a little service thing of how can I help you, you might notice that it's like giving you sort of canned responses based on the questions you ask. So that's more of your classic response. That's like predefined responses based on, the question that came in. Generative is kind of like using, Copilot Chat or Chat GBT, where it's going to kind of use generative AI to build out that answer. In our case, I think, Logan, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe our agent is a generative orchestration, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So we'll select generative here. All right. Agent knowledge. So, what is the percentage of responses that come from knowledge? So what are we defining for it as sources? In our case, I mentioned it's got access to 2 different SharePoint folders, one with our marketing material on our Copilot services, the other one with a bunch of material from Microsoft on what Copilot can do. And so in this case, we're saying don't look at anything else. So in this case, it is 100% of our responses are going to come from knowledge sources. And then what is the percentage of responses from tenant graph grounding? Well, in this case, it's all SharePoint, it's 100%. All right. So agent actions and topics. So here we're going to help agents answer a query, execute workflows, connect to external systems, or provide topic-specific guidance. All right. So let's take a look at this first response from us here. So how many agent flows have you configured for your agent? Logan, help me out with this one.
Yeah, so for this agent, we don't have any, so 0. Yeah.
Okay. Can you do just a quick overview of what an agent flow is?
Yeah, an agent flow would be so basically, the agent would trigger some sort of process. So, if you asked it some sort of question, it would change an Excel file or send an email in Outlook, some sort of external process that's being triggered.
Okay. And since we said we didn't have any agent flows, we're saying that how often will they run? Well, if we have 0 flows, they'll be run 0.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. And then agent autonomous triggers. So, this is like, does an event trigger the agent to do something, or is it somebody goes in and asks the question? In this case, it's meant to just be a Q&A agent to help out our AM team. So in this case, how many triggers will you add to your agent? 0.
Yep.
All right. And then the last question here, Logan, I'm going to have you help me out with again here is agent optional modifiers. So will you use prompt tool? So maybe will we, yes or no? And then give us a quick overview of what a prompt tool is.
Yeah, so in this case, our answer is going to be no. But a prompt tool is essentially kind of a way to like hard code a response into the agent. So
Okay.
if I want to ask, the agent a specific question, and I always want the agent to respond in the same way, with 3 different options, say, or have it like a little card pop up. It's basically just a way to hard code types of responses into an agent. But in this case, we're not going to be using any.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we've got a pretty simple agent here now. There's no submit button down here at the bottom or anything like that. So what we do is we'll kind of pop up to the right here and you'll see in our case, it's a pretty simple agent. It's not being used a ton. It's going to use about 720 messages per month, or about $7.20. So, you can play around with this. You can see how increasing the users or increasing the amount of, like, kind of hits per user will affect the pricing here. Play around with the sources, maybe add in external sources, all of those kind of things. And what you'll note is, as you play along here, you'll see this just populates as you go. You can always hit reset here if you wanted to start from scratch. But again, really good tool to just give you a rough idea of how much an agent might cost you. In today's episode of the Copilot Compass, we talk to you about estimating costs with Copilot Studio agents. So I gave you, a little bit of an overview of the three ways that you can get access into Copilot Studio, and sort of the differences there. And then we touched on using the Copilot Studio estimator tool to, you can do exactly what it does, estimate, agents, and how much that might cost you in the form of consumption or messages.
Yeah, I remember it was always, pretty confusing to me when I was first getting started about the whole pricing model. But this calculator, it really makes things a lot more clear. And, hopefully the rest of the episode kind of cleared things up for you guys. So if it did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment. And remember, we have our Q&A sessions every episode. So give us your questions. And remember, new episodes are released weekly on Tuesday.
Yeah, next week we're going to touch on building a center of excellence to drive Copilot chat usage at your organization. So I think, this is a really important time. Even if your organization's like very early stages of AI, you're recognizing, hey, we haven't embraced this stuff yet, but our competition probably is. We've got to figure out a way to get started. We really strongly recommend Copilot chat versus just letting people use something like a chat GBT, because if you use chat GBT, every business question you ask it is being used to train those models. So Copilot chat really offers you a whole heck of a lot more from a security perspective. But you also want to make sure you kind of standardize that within the organization, and you don't have sort of a wild, wild west of AI happening. So a center of excellence is a really great way for you as an organization to sort of independently drive that usage and drive that compliance. So we'll talk to you a little bit about what is a center of excellence, if for those of you that aren't familiar with it, and then how you can kind of deploy that model to drive the kind of Copilot chat utilization that you're looking for.
Thanks for joining us, and I will see you next week.
Awesome. We'll see you next week.